a consultant, really strategic digital transformation consultant, so on a strategic level. I'm also mentor at Uterus Inc. Startup Incubator. And I'm also supervisory board within some companies and organizations. Supervisory board, it's in Dutch. In English, it would be non-executive board member. And also there, I'm expected, to inform companies about digitalization, basically, and what the technology can do for them, and really to help them out. I am also a co-author of a couple of books, Implementing the Internet of Things and the Revolutie from Internet of Things. The last one we also use partly for our course. So that's about me. If you like the presentation and want to hear more, obviously you can follow the course because I'm also lecturing it, but you can also drop me a tweet or a message to LinkedIn, and I will respond to you. So about IoT, one of the most important questions that's always asked since I'm working with IoT, and that's in particular from the business side, because I'm also MBA and I worked in a lot of commercial positions in different corporate companies and as an entrepreneur. But it's always about, what's IoT? It's a buzzword, the container word. So I say, what's IoT to you? So let's discuss that. It's to some people it's sensors. To some people it's gateways and the protocols and domotica and platforms. But it is also technology, but it's also much more than a bunch of technologies. It's also really the way that we conceptualize the reality. It's a way. It's a new design language. It's a new ground based on we can reformulate the way we do business, we interact with each other, the way we conceptualize things, products, the way we orchestrate and coordinate activities within the companies. It's really a pretty fundamental reformulation of both businesses and technology. So, it makes its processes more efficient and personalized. The information is based on real data instead of some models. It enables us to better react to problems, etc., etc. So it's much more than a bunch of technology to me. Actually, ever since technologies have first came out, the value of technology was not really deriving from adopting the technology itself. The value derives from really the changes that your business makes to make processes and to make their products better because the technology is applied. So, the big problem is, of course, that technology is changing very fast, but the organization are changing very slowly. So that's why it's important to really go also beyond technology and discuss the transformation, the business transformation issues. That's why we are talking about business transformation tonight. Let me see. It just sprang from. I'm not done yet with this slide. So it's discussing on how will your company do business differently, because the technology is there. It's also about envisioning the change that you have with this technology and leading the change within the companies, especially if you're in a top organization. Because as I mentioned, I'm talking a lot of CEOs and I'm talking to a lot of these guys on the supervisory board members, etc. And they're not really so much into technology. But when I start talking to them about what technology could mean for the business, then they are suddenly very much interested. And the simpler I make it, the more I connect it to the business process, to the customers, to their propositions, the more interesting it becomes for them, and the more ready they are to support any technology business within a company, any transformation within the company. So IoT also involves the convergence, of really different domains like computing and communication technology domain, and integration of IT domain on one hand and operation technology on the other hand. Now suddenly these two guys, these two departments, these two group of people have to work together in order to be able to create something. In addition, it really has the impact on almost entire marketing mix. So if you combine all these, it means that the strategy of the business can be significantly altered when using and applying, the IoT and other digital technologies are really changing the business. Actually, the whole industries can change, as we are witnessing, of course, every day. So, learning leadership and management skills in order to figure out how to really transform the business with IoT seems very, very relevant to me, and also to some other people in the business. Of course, because I always find interesting before we proceed is, you have to think about yourself or what you are. In one of the white papers that I'm using, PricewaterhouseCoopers distinguishes 4 kinds of players within the IoT domain. So it's enablers, engagers, embedders, and enhancers. Probably many of you that are part of this community of sense makers are probably enablers, I assume, but I have to get to learn you better to get the idea. Enablers are really, the companies who provide technologies and infrastructures for IoT. Engagers are the company who actually use the technology of enablers, combine them in order to make new propositions and new processes and new value add to their customers. They're actually engaging with the end customer. And then enhancers are actually using the data that engagers create and relationships that they have established, and try to add some new services and new propositions to the existing business. So if engagers are, for example, insurance companies who use IoT technology in order to get some information, so they can offer insurances based on, for example, the driving behavior of the drivers. Then enhancing company could be the company that uses this data, could create some additional services for the drivers itself, for example. Then is the question, of course, whether these insurance companies would sell this data to enhancers, and whether there is a business model to interact within each other. And then we have these embedders. Embedders are actually the companies who are just adapting and using the IoT technology in order to improve their own operational processes. So, of course, for all these players, it's very interesting to go into the challenges that they have, and they're all a bit different. But one thing is in common, which is the business transformation. Disregarding and which part of this ecosystem you will encounter the problems of business transformation and how to get to it. So in order to understand why it's such a big buzz, the IoT and business, why do we have to care about really? Let's see how the IoT really affects business, and then not all of it, but some parts of it. Well, to start with, when you have this IoT product, let's say smart product, it's a complex environment. You're talking about the thing itself, you're talking about computing parts, you're talking about sensing parts, you're talking about connectivity and the cloud where something happens with this data, and you're talking about the app and everything comes together. So it's a very complex environment, which means that you can differentiate as a company much easier than when using only a simple mechanical product. So competition moves actually from price alone to really, you can ask a premium price for your product if you do well. So if you deliver a great product, it differentiates so much with the others, it's very difficult to compare. So it's great for business. If you look at customer segmentation, which is really very important for companies, it's a basic basis of their decisions on how to spend money on their marketing and on their sales, etc. Then they do this analysis of based on a couple of people or a couple of tens of people that they invite, to talk to, or do some research under hundreds of people, and then they build kind of model and this is a representation of reality. So this is who our customers are. The good things about Internet of Things is, of course, that you're connected with your real customers, real life, real time, which means that you know, you get the data, real-time, real life, who they are, where they bought your products, how they are using it, you know, how the product responds. So this customer segmentation is really based on the real life data. Your decision making is much more to the point, and it makes much more sense. Obviously, the products can be customized based on real data over product usage. So we will not be guessing anymore. It's basically the same like what you just mentioned. And you can set optimal prices. You can either compare these prices, you know, based on what's happening on internet or somewhere else, and real time, for example, update your price tags. But you can also see, imagine that you have this great shoe, women's shoe, the haute couture shoe, you know, the women like shoes. They spend a lot of money on shoes. I mean, not all of women, of course, so some of them. And so if you have a shop selling these shoes, it's very difficult to decide because you have to invest a lot of money in a very expensive shoe, for example. But how to set the optimal prices? It could be that 200 euros you could sell hundreds of them, and with 250 euros you will sell only 50 of them. It's very difficult to decide up front. But with IoT, Internet of Things, for example, then it makes it very easy because you can signal how many times, for example, the shoe is being taken into the hands of the customer and how many times the shoe is actually being bought. So you can actually play with the prices of the shoe to see, you know, which price works the best, for example. And which means that they call it also the price sensibility that becomes much easier if you're using Internet of Things. What it also does, it reduces dependency on distribution channels. Like I used to work with Gazelle as a consultant in the Netherlands quite some time ago, and they were selling bicycles, but basically they didn't know anything about their end customers. You know, their distribution channels knew the customers because they were selling the products, and they were dependent for 90% on distribution channels. But nowadays, everything is different, of course, because, you know, especially e-bikes, they know everything about the end customer. The customer has to register in order to be able to take to receive these value-added services that the Internet of Things will enable. So suddenly, you know, they have the opportunity to reduce their dependency on distribution channels. These are all huge, huge impacts on the business. So Internet of Things is really impacting the business on severe ways and on different levels. You also have, you know, to deal with new user interfaces. Nowadays, oops, now it's my earphone just went out. Just a second. Let me see if I can get it back. No, can you hear me?
Yeah, from here everything seems normal. Nothing happened.
Okay. Then I'll continue without my headphones. AirPods not really, they're disconnecting from time to time, so it's not perfect yet. Anyway, so new user interfaces I mentioned on different products. So it's not, you know, whether you go on a tablet and you log in on the cloud of your product, or you go to your app on your iPhone or on your tablet. These are new user interfaces, and as you know, the user interface can be very important for the interaction of the customers with your product. So it really takes another expertise and much more attention in development of your products on all different levels of interaction. Obviously, your product is evergreen. I mean, you can you know, update your software online. It has a huge impact. For example, within telecom business where I used to work in the past, before the iPhone, people used to buy a new phone every 11 months. So almost, you know, 2 telephones in 2 years. But when iPhone came, it suddenly changed to more than 20 months, because, you know, people don't need to buy a new iPhone because they can download the new software. So it's you know, it's suddenly they have new product within the old hardware frame. So it changes your business model. That means that the smartphones, the number of hardware sales will go down. So you'll have to find a new revenue streams in order to compensate this loss, for example. And at the end, the most important, you know, you have this 24/7 customer relationship with your customers that you have to sustain, that you have to keep exciting your customer, keep him happy with your services. And that at the end will really result in a better loyalty. So in switching costs for the customer will increase. The customer life value will increase because they will remain longer with your company, etc., etc. So huge impact. So a bit more internally, we already mentioned. So you're shifting from to much more interdisciplinary systems where mechanical parts and IT parts are working together, and also people who are developing it. Your focus will be on really the whole system, so not only on discrete products, but on the whole system of IoT, which is very important. But not only your system, but also the interoperability between your system and external products or clouds or whatever. So that also means that new powerful suppliers will arise, where in the past you worked with suppliers who developed some physical parts for your mechanical products. Now you're working with them, but you also working with guys who are developing maybe your parts of your IT systems and part of your cloud, etc. And they can be very powerful because suddenly your product is, the value add of your product moves from the physical part to this digital part. But this digital supplier is much more powerful than your mechanical supplier. So how do you deal with that? So. And many other things. I can talk like for a couple of days only how IoT really can affect business. But some things I just mentioned, I think it's important to realize that obviously the new business models are being enabled, and not only being enabled, if you look around you, that they're really altering and changing all businesses. So data as a product, the product as a service, power by the hour, and a shared product. They're really changing, industries, and many companies are going to suffer, just like many companies suffered from e-commerce that didn't think about these business models on time. And when you look at these interdisciplinary issues, what I just mentioned, then you will realize that you need new skills in the companies. You need new employees. For example, this real estate company from the Netherlands that delivers social housing, they started paying a lot of attention to digitalization and also IoT, but also artificial intelligence. But they hired, for example, data scientists and information architects and business consultants, etc. These guys never worked for these kind of companies. So you need to have the vision and the policy. Also, your HR will have to change in order to attract these kind of people, because you will need these capabilities. And that brings along that the clash of cultures potentially, because you have IT guys who never wear suits and always walk around in t-shirts, I've been told. And then you have these technology guys who are totally different, quite orderly. IT guys will develop in the evenings, and engineers will come at 7 o'clock and work until 5, and they are very precise. I'm just mentioning something. Of course, everybody's different. And then you have these marketing guys who have totally different mindsets. So you need to combine all these cultures. It's quite a challenge, because they really have to work together in order to be able to change the business. And obviously, everything can change concerning the compensation models, because you probably could go from your product to product as a service, and then suddenly you're in subscription business. So it changes everything regarding your compensation models. So if we look at the IoT system, on the left side, you will have things, and where we actually collect data, where actuators are and sensors and everything, and where you have these the gateways and whatever. Then in the middle, we have these cloud platforms where we collect data, we analyze data, we combine data with external clouds or whatever. And then we, connect to the existing business systems, or we send these data to great apps where they interact with the customer. So in between, of course, you have all different kinds of connectivity that we have to take into account. Now, this is the problem, that with IoT systems, for every single column, every single part of the IoT systems, now you have a customer involved. Where in the past you had this back office and front office thing, so the customer will bother you only on the front side. Now you have a customer who bothers all the way. you know, the way you collect the data, the way how the product looks like, the interface on the product, how the connectivity is working, how your cloud looks like, how your app looks like, whether APIs are working properly. The customers are asking for quality, reliability, support all over the place. So it's a different business all over, and that's what I said in every part of the business. And if you don't deliver, what will you get? You'll get very, very angry customer, and it doesn't really matter in which part of the system you don't deliver. So that makes you know, the on one hand the implication of IoT to businesses very huge, but on the other hand, you know, the threats as well, because you get angry customers if you not deliver properly. And that's probably one of the reasons, you know, that a lot of IoT projects stop after proof of concepts, because we are not able to deliver on all these parts. We're not able to you know, to make customers satisfied, and all the aspects have huge impact on the business. So now we go to business transformation. Now we know that it has a huge impact on the business. So how should business transform really in order to, well, to answer all these difficult questions and opportunities? I'll go only through the basics. You know, there are different models on how to do business transformation through digitalization and technology and IoT, etc. But the points that I'm going to mention is that they always come back. You know, doesn't matter which model you use, all these points that I collected actually always come back. So one of those is, you know, you need to engage the whole organization. Well, the whole organization, of course, what does it mean? Does it mean, you know, a couple of departments, or really the whole organization? Doesn't really matter. It's really about people who, you know, interact with the processes that you want to improve, or the customers, most preferably with the customers. So these guys really need to be involved, because we don't know where this whole thing is going towards, this whole digitalization and IoT, etc. You know, we cannot think about the potentials in the future. So the closer you are to the customer, the closer you are to the operations, the more aware you are of the technology, the better you will understand which improvements are possible. So engaging the whole organization seems very important. And the second one is really creating joint teams. You know, IoT is not about single activity. It's not about engineers. It's not only about IoT or marketing people. It's about joint teams really working together to deliver. Oops, let me go back. Sorry. Obviously, once we've done that, we create these joint teams, and you have to look at the technology possibilities that there are. So you need to invest really as a company into getting this knowledge, getting these digital capabilities, not immediately to get it in, you know, in a company, but really getting aware of what technology possibilities there are. And then looking at customer engagement, so through customer journeys, for example, or in your operations, and these joint teams from different areas, they should be able to connect these things, you know, to connect the opportunities to improve the customer experience and your product offering, to improve your processes with the technology which is available. They can come up with good ideas on how to do it and how to interlace these two. So basically, they have to develop this joint case on how to interlace this digital and physical world and to make them work together for the company and for the good of the company. That should result eventually in really business case for making a business investment. So it's, you know, one of the reasons that a lot of projects would not go through, because they're invested to and looked at as really single projects. You know, there is a proof of concept here, proof of concept there, and they're not part of the transformational vision, and they're not. There is no business case which is made in the form of business investment. It's a digital investment with very short-term goal. But if you will lift it up to the level of business investment, then you're discussing this business with your CIOs, you're discussing with your management, and not only with lower the parts of the organization and different departments. And then very important, digital leadership. You know, it's the management really needs to take this responsibility that this digitalization, or especially it's related to IoT because it's so impactful. that it's important for the company. You know, they need to be leaders and really to promote this idea. And some examples are, for example, that all the employees have received the tablets and basically were asked to interact with each other through social media, you know, just to get used to this digital way of working, interacting, you know, looking at webinars like we are doing today, and talks. And you know, once they internalize this digital way of interacting, then you involve them in different digital and IoT projects. So it's a very important one, I think. Obviously, the government structure is very important, but that's with all projects. Nothing will happen until there is a good governance and leadership in place in order to coordinate, to orchestrate activities. And you know, it should be a place. Obviously, some of the new things regarding IoTs, for example, and digitalization are chief digital officers, for example, and some liaison officers that they come up with. And sometimes they also use these shared business units, for example, to drive the change within the organization. But, you know, the governance structure is very important. And obviously developing these digital capabilities doesn't have to be within a company. You can also decide to develop these capabilities by working together with some external partners. Be open to developing new business model, as I mentioned, because, you know, before you know, your competition will do it and you'll be out of the business. You examine your HR strategy and develop really foundational capability, which means you will probably start with 1 or 2 projects who are not so large or maybe not even impactful, but in the future you might have, and you cannot envision it now, many more of these projects who can really be very useful. So if you have this foundational capability, which is durable and resilient, you will have more opportunities in the future to make things better. One of the things is, for example, digital platform, where you can add all different kinds of services, for example, for your company. And the last one, which really applies for all different kinds of transformation processes, is align your rewards really to your transformation goals. You know, that's the people will tell you that they like changes, that they like what you're doing, but if you connect their activities to the reward system and you reward them for their contributions, then you know, change will proceed much faster. So where should we begin?
Boban, how many slides do you still have?
I have a lot.
Really?
But let me do a couple of more.
I just want to, because I missed a question in the beginning, but if you just take it 1 slide back, if anyone has a question about it, because this is a really holistic overview, I think, of really valuable insights. Is there anyone who has a question about it? Because we're going very quick, so I just want to have a small pause, because I have never seen such an integral, holistic overview of all the things. It's not only IoT, it's a really transformation tips. So anyone who wants to comment on this or
anything what we discussed until now, really.
Yeah, there was, but that's from one of the first slides, but somehow I missed that question. Just before you have the 4 players in the field. You used us sense makers as an example of one of enablers.
I was wondering whether a lot of sense makers are enablers indeed.
Yeah, but the question, one of the questions was if you could give an example of each of the players. And
sure, enablers are technology providers, as I mentioned. So it could be Cisco, for example. Just to give you an
because
example.
you know, have businesses or
Yeah, or some sense company that makes sensors, for example. That's enabler. But they don't know, you know, where this technology is going to be used for, but they develop it because they think it's going to be very valuable to some companies. And then you have these engagers who will use this technology, use the IoT platform, for example, or ThingWorks or whatever, use the sensors from enablers, and then they will develop their own service. For example, insurance companies who might want, you have these bundles. It's a Dutch insurance company. So they give you this stack that this small sensor that you can put in your car, and they can follow your driving behavior, for example, and reward you even for you know, a certain behavior, a certain amount of kilometers that you're actually driving. So the platform that they use and the sensor that is delivered by enablers, but the bundles itself is an engager. And they will also collect all kinds of data. And it could be that there is an enhancer who would like to use this data to create even more additional services. You know, some applications that driver itself will find interesting, for example, about his own driving behavior. Now, the insurance company doesn't really care. It's only about really theft, about you know, about their behavior that has to do with damages on the car. But for a driver itself, for example, it could be fun to get more information about his driving habits or whatever. Maybe, you know, someone would like to see where their husband or their wife is, you know, going to from time to time, etc. So enhancers could be the, you know, the apps we develop based on this data. Of course, there are some ethical questions, privacy questions, etc. Whether you should do it or not. But I'm just giving you an example. And the betters are really, you know, the companies, the shell itself that uses IoT technology in order to improve their efficiency of their own process.
Internally, okay.
Internally.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
Well, I have one question of the, I don't see any hands, but on the last sheet where we ended just now, because it was about rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's, I notice in my organization, it's very hard to reward the people for transformation, because in the end, the operation always wins. So could you give an example of a company or a tactic used that was very effective in rewarding people to be part of the transformation?
I cannot name the company, but I can name the situation that well, actually I can name the company that was some time ago as well. For example, it has nothing to do with IoT, but it has to do with IT, for example. But it's about change, so it doesn't really matter. It was a company which is called Lost Boys from Amsterdam, where I used to do the projects. So it was about the improving the projects, for example. And there you have the situation that developers had different reward structures, a reward reward system than the interaction designers, and they all had different rewards structure compared to the people who sell the projects. That resulted on project overruns all the time with more than 20%. So one of the things that they changed in order to improve this project overruns is to align the rewards over all three different disciplines. So developers, the interactions, interactivity designers, and salespeople. So it's what you learn from that is that you have to translate, I think, the results of the change that you want to achieve to the reward. So it really depends on a project. I cannot really think now about a good example because I wasn't involved in this specific part. But let me think about and do some research, and I'll come back to you with some concrete examples. So I think it's a very good question.
Yeah, it's like I said, these are transformation tips, not only,
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So and I said, okay, now we have, you know, we know that it impacts the business really hugely. We know that we, you know, we should do this transformation, that we should involve the organization. We could make all these changes, but where should we begin? It's always the question, you know. But that's what I got anyway from the business. Okay, that's IoT. Now we understand, you know, it can do something for us, but how do we start? Where do we begin? You know, something like that. But what I mostly do is actually a method that I designed myself is, you know, coming back to this critical success factor method. Critical success factor method is actually trying to make the strategy actionable. It's very old method. It's from the accounting, etc., and management information and reporting business. It says, you know, on one hand, you define the customer, the critical success factors, and on the other hand, you look at your, you know, most important critical processes. And when you confront these, then you get really to the point that's important for the company. So I combine these to get to the IoT hotspots, because what's most relevant is really to develop, you know, the project for the improvement within the company, which is the most important in order to reach your strategy. So here we have an example of the company is called Coca-Cola, and their mission is really to refresh the world. That's you can translate that. Well, that's their strategy. So you know, then I looked at what could be their critical success factors. Well, obviously it's availability and temperature, because you know you need to get the Coke. If it's not in a neighborhood, they will not refresh. So they have to be all over the world in order to you know, to refresh the whole world. And the temperature has to be good, because I don't know whether you tasted Coke ever, which is not cold, it's really not refreshing. So, you know, these are two very important critical success factors, availability and temperature. So if you confront this with critical internal processes, which is really making cold drinks available at point of sale, you receive actually to a very important IoT hotspot, which is refrigerator at the point of sale. You know, you need to know that there is a refrigerator. You know, you need to know where this refrigerator is. You need to know whether there is Coke in the refrigerator, and you need to know whether this Coke is cold. So if you can get all these data and, you know, change your business so you always have availability and you always have a cold Coke, then, you know, it really fits your strategy, just to give an example. Then you can define the key performance indicators and the norms and strategic objectives, etc. So that would be a good place to start, for example, a business of IoT. Then if you look, you know, how to continue these kind of discussions on what to do with business, how to change business using IoT. I think it's very valuable. A model is developed by Bosch IoT Lab in cooperation with University of St. Gallen, which I present right here. It basically, you know, combines many different tools and methods, and it leads you through the process of several steps where you really methodically come from idea generation to really a business case, which is great. So I would really recommend, I already put there the link to the white paper of these guys. And interesting thing is they start with 55 business patterns. Some time ago, they did some research on all different business models in the world, now and in the past, and they found out that they're all based on these 55. And all new business model, or most new business models, are actually a combination of the existing business models. And then if you add the IoT layers to it, you get some new configurations and new opportunities. So this is great for ideation, for example, for thinking about different business models. Basically what they say, of course, they advise that you should do all this with workshop, within the form of the workshops, and also together with your customers, and also together with your stakeholders. Because what they're trying to do is really apply this lean startup approach and design thinking, which has proved through different projects really successful. So they say, you know, for every step of the process, you need to involve your customers and your stakeholders as well. Of course, in the second part of the process, after you selected the long list of different opportunities generated by this interdisciplinary team of your own employees and the customers and the stakeholders, then you'll go down to a short list, and you'll go through customer journey, really trying to envision the whole process of your company, starting from the customers up to your processes and everything around. And you will need to define the capabilities and also define really the stakeholders for every single project that you have defined. And it can be, as I talk about it, it's very holistic. So it could be companies, but it can also be the departments within the company. You know, if you are developing an IoT project or other project within one department, then other departments that you interact with are your stakeholders, for example. So it doesn't have to be really always related to the external customer or external stakeholders. It also can be related to your internal customers and your internal stakeholders. And then they advise that you, analyze these stakeholders and really what's important to them, what they deliver, what's their role, what's their really business model, how they, what's their cost structure, what is their revenue model, etc. So in order just to get an idea, how to deal with this project to make it successful. But the whole idea, of course, behind this model is to make an IoT and digital projects as viable as possible. So that's why it's so important to discuss this with so many people, to analyze so many different relationships, and to make a great business case so that's really viable, so that really, it's going to get investment from the company, it's going to be implemented, and it's going to be sustainable. That's the whole idea, to go beyond the proof of concepts that never, make changes after they're delivered. So, to go further, of course, there are some other models that you can use and that are being used. The Porter has developed really very interesting stories about applying IoT to both his models of 5 forces, where he analyzes the external world, and also the value chain model, where he really goes through every step of the internal organization and then discusses how IoT can be used in order to make some changes. A model that I'm really fond of, that I use also for my course, is the model of IoT avatar. This is a great communication model that you can use to develop your IoT idea, but also to communicate with different disciplines within the company. So this is an e-bike that is enriched with all different kinds of sensors, etc. So just an example. It can be really anything, but by envisioning, you can develop your idea, but you can also very clearly communicate this over different parts of the organization. So not only technology, but also the commercial departments. And basically the idea is that you develop the avatar for all parts of your IoT system that you want to develop. Depending on who you want to communicate with and what you want to do with this model, IoT avatar is very handy. So as you can see, the customer value is really being created on all different parts. So let's keep that in mind. And then the last but not the least, making a business case. It all falls down to the water if you don't make a business case, because the business case is always the basis of your financial decision making and your management decision making. Whether you're within a company, you need approval from your management to allocate the resources, or it's really about launching a new product or a new business model. Whatever it is, they always ask the business case, which is very logical. In the business case, you will have to define how much is it going to cost, but really on 2 aspects. One is you need to invest, of course, in your infrastructure that they call the capital expenditure, and on the other hand, you have this operational expenditure, so which is only dependent on the real usage of the system. Some examples are put in the model as I discussed, and of course also the revenues. But that's what it's all about. It's about comparing the revenues and the costs for the organization. So there you probably will make a difference between the hardware revenues, so it's one-offs, and recurring revenues, because very often in IoT system you will go to this recurring system where you have subscriptions, and then you need to plot these revenues during a time, then you start talking about customer lifetime value, for example, and you compare the customer lifetime value with your costs. So not only what customer brings now, but the customer brings during the whole life of the usage of your system. So here I have some set of most important strategic questions. I will not go to it again because we are really running out of time. I took a lot of time. I see Manon also being a bit impatient. So I'll wrap it up. You know, if I'm asked to make some takeaways from this presentation, which is really short, excerpt from what we discussed within the course Internet of Things for Business, then it's really that IoT systems are really by default triggering the business change. You know, IoT, because it's a system, because it has influence on all these different parts of the organization, it needs to trigger the business change. And if it doesn't, then it's a problem. For businesses, it's really about changes that technology brings and not about the technology itself. For successful implementation is really about involving different disciplines, especially if you're working with IoT projects. You know, when you look at the business cases that I just mentioned, this is really very important because the idea, but what I understood until now, that there are many successful IoT projects, but also many IoT projects that just stopped when they delivered as proof of concept. And I'm saying, you know, use all these tools and go around and get even more in order to let's try together to get this rate of successful IoT projects beyond the proof of concept even higher. That's anyway one of my tasks, and I'm really excited about talking about IoT, talking about the possibilities to apply this to businesses on different management and board levels. So thank you very much for listening tonight, and I hope it's inspired you. And if you want to hear more, learn more, then join the course, or maybe we can talk to each other some other time. Now probably you have some questions.
Amazing, Boban, really. As I said, for me, it's more a business transformation. That's why of course it's part of the MBA. But I like the part that IoT could be an extra trigger, but also it doesn't work without a transformation.
Yeah.
Because that's what it really does. So I have no questions in the chat, but I can imagine that everyone was like me, entertained. I mean, really thinking about it. So please, if anyone wants to ask a question, Geert, just unmute and ask it yourself. Yeah, I'm asking him to unmute. Geert Cambray had oh, I thought he had a question. Maybe it was an applause. I don't see it anymore. Okay, but feel free to unmute your microphone if you want to have a question or a talk. What I was wondering also from the information from Bosch, it is a really intensive process before you can even start. It sometimes looks like that. And I think that's why also in practice, in a lot of companies, we just start with innovation, with good ideas, because the energy gets a bit drained away from all the preparations you do beforehand. It's also like within the presentation from Paolo, the 80% versus 20%. But the 80% is in the preparation if you want to do it well. There is no shortcut, but if there would be a shortcut, would you prioritize one advice?
Well, I would. I think that the model that tells you, you know, how to get to this IoT hotspot, I think it's a very interesting one.
Yeah,
because it will help you really to get the most important part of where you will most probably get the most support within the organization.
Yeah, I really like, because it was really simple.
Yeah, it was very simple.
It's a brilliant example also with Coca-Cola. Yeah, let's try to make every example so simple.
Simple is good.
Yeah, and also in the chat, it's all a lot of thank you, but it's also the right combination of business knowledge and technical expertise. But that example, that model helps going to the core. Paolo, do you want to add anything, questions, or because we went
from... much to add other than I wanted to just highlight that we're also working on a project, and when I heard a lot of what Boban is saying, a lot of it is resonated because it's also more working towards what the real business needs are, tying it to that. And when you think of the vision, you're also thinking, how do you find a champion within the organization? Because quite often that makes a huge difference. You think, oh, it's nice having someone that's passionate or that's pushing this and standing behind it, not only management and have vision behind it, but someone who can drag it along. And I've seen that also with my interactions with, I think a year ago, or a year and a half ago, there was a conference where we spoke with someone in the organization, and he said, well, we're not familiar with this, but I'm passionate about it. And therefore it's sort of buzzes around me. And that's why I really appreciated seeing that side of the talk very heavy in the business side, tying it to the needs. I think that's quite important. So I like the presentation too. Thanks, Boban.
I have one question from Gijs, and I think I'm going to ask it to both of you. What goes wrong most often in concrete offerings or projects? Give us the best bloopers. Boban, you any?
Yeah, that goes not taking into account the needs and probably the threats of the project delivers to different stakeholders, internally and externally. No, it's changing a lot, and that's why it's important to.
You're saying threats, and that's triggers me because often you think it's a good idea and you don't understand what people have against it.
Yeah, but if their way of working is changing, if their position is changing, then it's a threat. And if they are not taken into in a project and made clear what kind of impact this has on them, and that it actually improves, maybe, hopefully, their own position, maybe makes their work much more fun, etc., then they will continually think, okay, that's great, but what if I lose a job after they implement this project? So that's why I like in this model of Bosch, is that they really spend a lot of time on analyzing the stakeholders within the project.
Yeah, I'll write it down. Sorry.
I have a question. One of the things with innovation is that it always takes a long time. Do you have suggestions how to make the time you need to do new things, to have a lot of innovation, to shorten it?
It would be great if I would have answer to this question. I would be quite a rich consultant, I think, which I'm not. What I have read from all different papers and that I analyzed as well, also for my course, is that companies that really are successful have really taken this all these digitalization projects where IoT is always playing a very important role, up really to the highest level. It's a program, it's a company program. And then on all different ways, this program will be implemented throughout the organization. Wherever it's only about individual projects that, let's try this out, let's try that out, without really making it a company program, it's mostly stops after the proof of concept. So if you want, I think that's the best learning that I have found in IFAL through, reading through all different kinds of projects throughout the world.
Okay, thank you. But I mean the innovation itself. Before people are used to have a new way of using stuff or using new things, or it always takes a long time before they know how to do it. Or
oh, that's what you mean. Yeah, the learning there is that you take away how they used to do a job. So if there is other way to do the job, then you take that away. So you confront them only with the new way. That's the fastest way.
You're swimming by being thrown in the pool. Oh, sorry, Paulo.
If I were to add to that, I just want to say, like, you know, what we've experienced was it's also quite scary. That's why we spoke of like the challenges and the changing of practices, because you can also just take it away and force them, but that might have some negative effect on the, depending on the organization and the culture and all of that. And I think what the approach we take also with Tino and a lot of our projects, especially the ones I'm starting to be involved in, I quite often have some serious discussions with our partners, and we're fortunate enough to at some point turn some cases away and say we're not going to participate, because quite often, and I think this ties to that business need, and when you sit with a customer or with a partner and they don't understand their needs or they haven't shaped that, but they think, yes, this sounds like it's the right thing, not taking that extra time to really getting down to what the real need is, because when you tie it down to real needs, you have a stronger argument to that vision, to that, again, that champion approach, where you can say, okay, it has to happen. So again, that's vaguely said, but that's what we sort of see. And the previous question was also like the bloopers. I'm not going to say that there aren't any bloopers, but we tend to, from Tino's perspective, maybe because we're fortunate enough to say that, but we every year have our Brilliant Failures Awards, where things that seem to have gone wrong, right? What did we take? What did we learn from that? But also, what did it bring us? Because you run into other aspects, because the kinds of organizations we deal with are rather big and have, you know, it's not as straightforward as, oh, it's a company that, you know, has a simple structure. It quite often has to do with cultural change and has to do with the skills that are available or that aren't available even from our side, right? Then you have to sort of mix and match. So that's how I wanted to sort of just add to this discussion of this.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions? Okay. Then I think it's a wrap up. Thank you so much both for joining us and sharing your story. Really insightful.
Thank you very much, Manon, again for inviting us. And all you guys for participating. It was a great pleasure.
I wish I was more in business. I think I could do it now. So thanks a lot. A small present will come your way. We always like to thank our speakers by mail this time instead of personally, but hopefully in the future we also meet in person. So thank you both. Thank you all the other people for listening in, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.